Gentlemen, all three of you, wonderful to see you all. Corporate governance and leadership. Where does leadership fit in to, I guess, well, for you guys, predominantly elite sport? Where is leadership in 2018? How much has it changed going back maybe over the last 20 years? Cam?
I haven't been around for that long.
Well,
20 years,
almost.
close to, about 17 years, but it's changed a fair bit. It has. It's, I think back when I first started playing NRL, there wasn't as much media coverage as there is now. There wasn't as much coverage overall of the game and sport in general. There were no phones that could record anything that was going on in general public as well, which I think is the biggest change for athletes is how much scrutiny there is on athletes these days and their behaviour, particularly from the general public, with their ability to just whip a phone out and film you doing whatever you're doing. So, I'm not saying that I wish I played in a different time because I could do whatever I want and misbehave. It's not that at all. I think it just gives the athlete the ability to just be human like everyone else and enjoy a good time without thinking about anything else. But as far as leadership goes and the way that it's changed for me, I haven't tried to change so much as a leader. I think the one thing that I wanted to do when I first started out as a leader, or my aspirations as a leader, was to identify the style of leadership that I had and the style of leader I wanted to be. I think the better word to use instead of change is adapt, or the ability to adapt to how you need to have different styles of leadership now, particularly with younger guys. I think everyone in different industries, you see young people now, they are different, they operate differently. And for me, as a captain of a rugby league side, I've got so many different personalities in that team, different ages, different cultural backgrounds as well. So I think the ability to adapt to managing different people, different situations, and understanding how to get the best out of those people. I think that's probably been my biggest challenge over the last sort of 15 years, I think.
It seems like it's continually shifting the duty of care that a club has towards, an organisation has towards an individual. And having said that, the obligations of an individual to an organisation. Do you feel there's been a shift, or it's continually shifting in your role, in your involvement with the Titans and obviously Broncos over the years?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lutsy. It certainly has. I've been involved in rugby league in particular for some time, and in the media for quite some time before that. And the reality is, we are under greater scrutiny. So you've certainly got this, and you need to have this awareness that everything you do is going to be weighed and measured and magnified. But essentially, I guess it's about I think as I've gone on, you've had to consider more stakeholders, if it were. At the Broncos, publicly listed company, I was the guy. I was the chair there when we decided to give Matt Lodge a chance, for instance, and then I left, and then it all erupted. And the days of players seeking redemption through the game at the highest level, whatever sport it is, are almost over. You're actually not going to get that chance anymore. I don't think I felt in Matt Lodge's case, he still had to fix up what he'd done in the States, which he subsequently did. He'd worked really, really hard on himself and in the community, but I actually saw, there's still a bit of the romantic in me. I actually thought that he could reach the highest levels of the game and be a wonderful role model. And he's actually been out there. He's actually been out talking about the errors of his ways and, helping young people through difficult situations and what have you. But honestly, given the furor, I probably would have thought twice about it.
Everyone's got an opinion. Okay, so if there's a complaint, if someone complains to, I presume it's the same for you as it is for any organisation, if you get one complaint for someone about something you said in a press conference, there's probably going to be a meeting about that if one person complains. And the sport can then get caught up in that sort of churning process of just nothingness as well. So how do you take all that and push it forward as well?
I'll have a go. I think if we're looking at rugby league, so the game of rugby league has massive upside globally. It's got so much potential on the international stage. In Australia, we have a very strong league with a governing body over the top of it, but people confuse the two. So is the NRL the governing body? Are they a business? What's the role of the international federation? What's the role of the state bodies, the QRL, New South Wales Rugby League? So it's a little bit confused in that sense. So what that tends to do, I guess, is the point you're asking, is it creates a little bit of overlap, a little bit of confusion, a little bit of us and them, a little bit of civil war, which is probably potentially not the best model for the game in terms of reaching its massive potential. And we've seen that with the women's game. We saw that with the World Cup. The test in Denver between New Zealand and England, it's got massive potential. So I think wherever possible, it's trying to streamline those decision-making processes so that when issues do arise, they're dealt with pretty quickly. The Greg Inglis issue before the last kangaroo test, that probably lingered a little bit too long. That should have been a decision that was made pretty quickly, and everyone just moved on. And including the player, the NRL who acted, even though it was the Kangaroos are representing the national body. So I think it's really about, and governance. It all comes back to governance. The governance is really just pretty much the process of making a decision and then enacting or implementing that decision. So if a governing body with a fairly streamlined decision-making process can make those decisions in a way that adheres to good governance, then the game can flourish. The game can just move on.
Yeah, it's a really strange tool, I guess, the social media, and some athletes use it better than others. I think, and that's because of the education around it and understanding that it can be used in a positive way. But guys that sometimes they get a little bit carried away and forget about who they are and their role in the community, as Dennis mentioned. It's whether athletes like it or not, we are a role model in some way. Some people are greater role models than others, but there's young people out there that follow athletes and want to be these people someday. I remember when I was a young guy, and this is when social media wasn't around, but I looked at my heroes on the TV, and I wanted to be them one day. So when you have so many people having access to you now directly through social media, it can be dangerous at times. So I think the most important thing with any type of social media platform is just having education around it. I know our organisation do a lot of work with our players around understanding the best way to use social media. And as I mentioned, some guys use it more than others. On a corporate level, some guys just use it for a personal use. But I think as long as you use common sense when you're using any type of social media, then you're going to be okay. But to give you an idea, I think, and I've seen this firsthand, or both with myself and my teammates. It's quite unbelievable now the abuse that you cop through social media. It really is, and you could play a certain game somewhere and maybe not perform so well, and if you're one of these guys that jump on the phone directly after the game, after the coaches had these debrief or whatever. I see the young guys grab their phone straight away and they want to see what people are saying about their performance, and it can have a huge effect on these guys, both positively and negatively. But more times than not, there's a negative effect. Someone's on there that's going to try and have a crack at you, and they get nasty, unfortunately.
Brutal.
It is, mate. It really is, and it can. And a lot of people they go over the top because it's easy to sit in the lounge room and type a few words on the phone or on the computer rather than standing in front of someone like there was in the old days and actually say it to them to their face, because they won't do it. Yeah. So it's you know, we've said it a few times already. It's a very different world that we're in now, and it's just being, I think, the biggest thing for you know, for us as athletes now is being educated around it and understanding how to use these platforms appropriately.
I acted for Basketball Australia on the basketball matter in the Philippines. I interviewed the players that were party to the sanctions from FIBA, the governing body in Switzerland. These were broken individuals because when they got off the court and were getting escorted by police and embassy officials back to the airport for their safety, they were getting death threats. It just pinging constantly from their social media updates. The notifications were going nuts. It was doctored images, doctored comments, and you know, for a sport as an employer, that's a duty of care issue for these guys as well.
From an organisational point of view, now it's something that duty of care or the mental aspects of an individual has never been more critical, Dennis.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's actually the Melbourne. They do a survey every year of how players rate their welfare and education staff, and generally the Storm are right up the top there. And Cameron talked about, you know, that caring element of leadership, which is, you know, is central to it all. And yeah, it's just interesting when you look at the NRL survey each year that the teams who you know, top the list in terms of welfare pretty much top the list in terms of how they finish in the competition proper. There's one outlier, the Titans.
Yeah, right.
No, unbelievable. Yeah, so the Titans are usually up there, you know, around about second spot. We've just got to convert that to a few wins on the field, but it's consistent. It's there year after year. It's interesting, isn't it? So they get, as our guys do, they get great training around, you know, trying to shut out the white noise of social media, etc.
Gents, just a quick question. In the last probably 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot of, particularly in the AFL, there's been a lot of homesickness that's come up. And I just wanted to sort of get your opinion. It doesn't ever seem to come up in North American sports, and it does also come up in other codes in Australia as well, wanting to be closer, you know, moving back to Perth or Adelaide or Victoria or wherever it might be. Are our players getting too soft these days? Is it something that you see in that regard? Are they getting too wrapped up in cotton wool? And then any time there's a challenge, they're saying, I want to go home and, you know,
yeah, I know. I'd like to talk to that. It's probably not a fair comparison. The professional athlete in the States has generally come through college, with, you know, almost 100%. So they've already been, you know, living away from home and got all their coping skills and what have you. And as you know, the NRL National Under-20 competition was knocked on the head last year, I think it was. There'd been a spate of suicides in the game, and you know, some of those young men, you know, had been living away from home, and the feeling was that they were being taken away from home, placed under undue pressure. The under-20s wasn't a great competition for converting talent into elite players, at only a very small proportion. So these kids at 19 and 20 are thinking, you know, their lives are over, pretty much. And it was also a factor too that, you know, a number of those boys came from Polynesian families with their really strong, you know, strong family ties, and the sense of failure and the sense of loss and sense of letting people down was, you know, probably even greater for those young men. And certainly here, you know, at the Titans, you know, we've now put a junior pathways project in place. It's sort of been in disarray, in line with the club's history in recent years. So obviously we want young guys growing up and young women growing up wanting to play for the Titans, but a lot of that's about letting them stay at home as long as they need to. I mean, some of us want to leave home earlier, obviously, but yeah, I do. I think they are better rounded, probably better rounded individuals in many cases if they stay at home a little bit that longer, particularly if they don't go to university or the college system.
I've got last question. In the last 12 months, we've seen a bit of absence of leadership regarding behaviour off the field. Who should be sanctioning all those sort of things in the domestic sport marketplace?
I don't know who should be. I mean, there's talk of a national sports tribunal coming in over the top of, say, the NRL judiciary, the AFL tribunal, anti-doping bodies, that sort of thing, as an interim step from Australia to, for some Olympic sports to the CAS or to sports that are signing up to the WADA anti-doping code. But certainly what we are seeing lately is that all stakeholders in sport have an opportunity to play a leadership role. Certainly where there's an absence of leadership from the governing body or from the club, what we're seeing lately is that the sponsor is stepping in and often taking that role. So he's not here to defend himself, and I don't think Rugby Australia's here either, but I'm pretty sure his agent's here. So I'll tread lightly. But we saw that with Israel Folau earlier this year with Rugby Australia, with some comments on Instagram, good old Instagram. It kind of dragged on for a little while through Rugby Australia, and for whatever reason, despite the fact that arguably they could make out a case that there was a breach of the code of ethics, code of conduct, maybe even the employment agreement, they did nothing. Whereas a sponsor, and this is from what I understand, again, from what I've read only in the media, the sponsor came in and perhaps triggered their own morals clause in their agreement with that athlete, and Land Rover pulled a personal sponsorship. So that's just one insight that you can glean from the media, where the governing body, there's a breakdown in behaviour or the wrong sort of behaviour, the governing body drags its heels, for whatever reason doesn't do anything, but the sponsor's stepping in and sanctioning that athlete for that behaviour. So that's probably, hopefully not, but it might be a trend in terms of where there's an absence of leadership, certainly.
Okay, we might let our three gentlemen go. It's very rarely we get an insight from three leaders of industry that we've had today, so we thank you three for your time very much. All the best in the coming future. Cam Smith, Matt Jessep and Dennis Watt, ladies and gents. Thank you for your patience and your interest today as well.